Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. We are on the air. This is Thesis.
3, 2, 1, we are on the air. This is Thesis. Everything is everything. I am your host, Jay Marie. How's it going out there, folks? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for showing up and hanging out with us today. Coming to you live from Zombie Land. Yes, sir. Well, I want to thank you for showing up and hanging out with us today. I hope you find yourself well and healthy and safe. Well, it's been a minute, but we are here, and I've been busy, but I got a little treat for you guys today. So I've talked about the crypto a little bit years ago. Back in 2021, we decided to get into some crypto, and I decided to start learning about learning more about it. What is it? What its utility is? Where is it going? Is it actually something to look into or maybe invest in? And as I learned more about it, I really dug in. I really wanted to know what crypto and blockchain is all about. So as I started learning more and more about this technology, I was drawn towards one of the blockchains. It's called Cardano, and the token is called ADA. I never really talk about that stuff because I'm not a crypto influencer or anything like that, so I stay away from talking about it. But over the past year, I've been able, since I've gotten more acquaint, you know, as I learned more about crypto and started investing money in it, and the project that Cardano that I put money into. The CEO, the founder, more likely, he's not a CEO of the project because it's decentralized. But he's the founder of it. His name is Charles Hoskinson. He owns several companies. He has a biotech company. He has a bison ranch. This dude has a Black Hawk helicopter. He climbs mountains and he hanging from helicopter. Like this dude is so cool. He's the CEO of Input Output Hong Kong. They are a tech company that helped design Cardano, and he's a pretty amazing guy. Um, so over the past year, as I've been getting involved and getting more, um, interested and getting more active, I guess, a little bit in that industry, uh, I've been able to have several conversations with Charles Hoskinson, the founder of Cardano. He makes himself available. He's really cool because he makes himself available. He does a lot of interviews, and he's always making himself available on X. They have the X Spaces, which is like a big chat room, and he'll come in, and you get to talk to him, ask questions or whatever. And over the past several months, I've been able to talk to him several times, and what I decided to do was I decided to compile some of those conversations. I've had more. We actually would have had more, but if the person who's putting on the conversation doesn't record them, then once it's over, right? So there's been several times when I've been able to talk to him and it wasn't recorded. So it was really uh, it's really shame because he had some great answers to some great questions. But what I did is I compiled a few times that we've talked with each other, and I've decided to put it together for an episode for you guys, so you can kind of see, maybe learn a little bit more about Cardano. He does talk about. We don't go all into the tech and the blockchain. We talk more about a little bit more about philosophy and these things, and it was a really great conversation. So I put those conversations together for you guys. I know you're gonna enjoy it. This is a great guy, Charles Hoskinson. If you want to look him up, he does AMAs on his own channel. He talks about the tech. He's very philosophical. He's a great guy, and it really truly is an honor to be able to talk to him every once in a while. So, without wasting any more time for you guys, here you go is our conversation today with Charles Hoskinson. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, Charles, thank you for your time. Um, I wanted to start off by saying
I think humans are more closely related to technology than we may be aware of or may be able to see. I start by saying that because I was going back during the week and looking at some of your old whiteboard videos from 6, 7 years ago. And the thing that really stuck out to me was you have not veered, swayed, you have not changed your tune in all of these years that you've made yourself available to the public, whether through videos or whiteboards or AMAs or whatever. You've always stood on principle, the scientific method, and in my opinion, even the Socratic method. And my question to you is, I guess seeing how you were a mathematician, this might have a little bit to do with it. How important is it for us as humans, in society, or while we're building something, a house or a system? How important is it for us to strictly follow certain principles, while we're building something, whether a house or something digital, a system?
So the number one thing you guys got to understand is before you do anything at all in life, you have to ask some basic questions to establish some rules about what you're going to do and how you're going to play by it. Number one, you say, if I do this and I screw it up, what are the consequences? That's the first question you ask. And who do those consequences impact and affect? If the consequences are, the cake that you're baking, if you screw it up, it doesn't taste very good and people get pretty upset about it. Maybe, Aunt Jane gets a little sick, and that's that. Okay, that's one thing. If the consequences are that you screw up, that people die, people lose millions to billions of dollars, or you irreparably damage a brand or reputation, that's a different failure category. And so the thing about humanity is that we build stuff, we do stuff, and every single thing we do, it carries risk. I remember as a kid, right before I went to college, watching on TV, ooh, Columbia, that looks pretty good. Boom, blew up in the sky, 2003. In fact, we just had the 20th anniversary not too long ago about that. And that's the best of the best. That's NASA. They spend billions of dollars to do everything right. They use formal methods. These guys are geniuses. And yet, somehow, some way, they screwed it up. So, just because you follow the right recipe doesn't necessarily mean that there's not going to be a potential problem. Things happen, unforeseen things happen. But it's a game of averages, it's a probability engine. And basically, if you do things the right way over the long term, you will win. Okay, so you first have to ask, what are the consequences of failure? And then, how do we mitigate failure? Is this so new that it's never been done before? Or has stuff like this been done before? So I looked at Cardano protocol and I said, okay, this can control your assets, this can control your vote, and this can control your identity. This is going to control your economic agency as a person. And with Midnight private information, this could control your safety. Imagine if you're a political dissident in China and you're publishing anonymously videos and content about the camps that they have. Do you think you're going to last too long if the government figures out who you are? Imagine if you're in Russia and you're running an underground newspaper and you have photos of Navalny's body and you have his autopsy report. You think you're going to last too long if you publish what happened to him? No. So it is life and death. These systems are life and death. And if they fail, then people die, billions of dollars are lost. So we started from first principles way back in the day, and we told everybody what we're going to do. And I followed the Paul Halmos way of doing things. He was one of my favorite mathematicians. And when I was young, I read his book, Naive Set Theory. And in it, he said, tell them what you're going to do it, and then tell them what you did. So we said, we're going to follow formal methods as an ecosystem. We follow formal methods as an ecosystem. And we told everybody we're going to follow formal methods. Now, our competitors, other people in the ecosystem, Ethereum people, Solana people, even Bitcoin people, they say, oh, that's such an unnecessary thing. How dare you do that? Meanwhile, major hack after major hack after major hack after major hack, people get arrested, kidnapped, die, whatever, all these problems across the space. And they take no accountability for it. They say, oh, well, it's just open source software, just the way things are. It's like, okay, well, here's the problem. You do that long enough, either you'll never get adoption because people will no longer trust these systems, or the government will come in and regulate you because you're unable to regulate yourself, in which case they're going to hand the entire keys to the system to their friends, not you. And that means BlackRock and Goldman Sachs and all these other actors are basically going to control the entire ecosystem. Right now, about 10 entities control the majority of crypto under the hood. They decide who gets liquidity. They move the markets. They decide basically which DeFi applications are legitimate or not because they control the underlying asset-backed stablecoins. And they kind of pull the levers on hash power and all this other stuff. Not a lot of people, okay? Legacy was not eaten by crypto. Crypto is being eaten by legacy as a direct consequence of a lack of understanding, appreciation for consequences and first principles. So that's the other side of the equation, is you have to start with the end in mind and say, what is the end result you want to have? And I said, I want to maximize freedom and liberty. I want to build a system that we wake up every day and we say, thank God this thing is here and it protects us. We all know with absolute certainty that if the Bill of Rights did not exist in the United States of America, we would already have significant restrictions on religion, speech, and other things. We all know it. Let's not pretend like, oh, these guys would actually be awesome and everything. No, every single day, it's a war of attrition where they fight a little bit more to take what they can't even legally take away from us. And every single day, the next generation seems to be a little bit more in love with vast restriction of free speech. So what about hate speech? Well, you can't yell fire in a theater. Oh, what about this thing? It's like, oh, okay, so only speech you agree with should be free. Yeah, everything else is hate speech. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's why we have a First Amendment, so we can just talk about the weather, right? It's what we do. We have freedom of religion. Well, as long as you believe in my religion, everything's cool. What about the other religion? Oh, no. No. Those people are weird people. They're dangerous people. We can't allow them to have their faith and their practices and their beliefs. Their beliefs can't violate what we've decided. Okay, so I'm tired of every single day watching that happen, and I realize that in my lifetime, all of those things will be gone if we don't fight for them and renew them. The Tree of Liberty requires people every day to water it, take care of it, care for it. It doesn't take care of itself. It's an intergenerational thing. My grandfather handed it to his father, and his father handed it to me. Okay? And so it's a chain. And we are now at an impasse. The world is going to be radically different in the year 2035. You're going to have gene therapies as a commonplace practice, cybernetics as a commonplace practice. The majority of the workforce will likely be mechanized. They'll likely be robots. Artificial general intelligence has a greater than 50% chance of existing. All money will be digital. The majority of transactions will be done by asset-backed stablecoins and CBDCs, which are tightly regulated and controlled. Every moment of your waking life will be monitored. Everywhere you go, you'll be next to a microphone, probably one you carry yourself. Everywhere you go, you will be on camera, probably one you carry yourself. And if not, somewhere else. There will be extensive augmentation of the existing software that we use, such that every single thing we think and do will be put into an algorithm, and a threat score will be put to our name. In addition, there's a gal over at Duke University, I forget her name at the moment, she talks about cognitive liberties. Already in China, right now, they're beta testing at factories, workers wearing EEGs and exposing them to propaganda. And if they have a positive impression of it, they get a higher social credit score. And if they have a negative expression of it, they actually demerit them. It's called cognitive liberty. Talk about it. There's going to be devices because of LLMs that are actually going to be able to read your thoughts well enough that they can get a pretty good understanding if you're going along with things. And those will become mandatory in certain societies by 2035. And will gladly do it. They'll be put into earbuds. Right now, Samsung actually is negotiating a deal with several small companies to do proofs of concepts to integrate EEG technology in their earbuds. Apple is exploring the same thing. So these devices are getting to a point where they can get a pretty good notion of what you're thinking. And people are going to, just like they sign up all their information on Facebook, gleefully share these models, not realizing what they're sharing. This is the world we're heading towards by 2035. Okay, that's the world. I see it. The only antidote is blockchain cryptocurrency technology. And then you get all these moon boys in our industry, and they wake up every day and say, number go up is the only thing that matters. I say, okay, so let me play a thought experiment for you. I'll give you $10 million, but you live in the dystopian world that I just told you about. Would you take that deal? Oh, yeah, because I'll be rich. Oh, okay, yeah, but you're monitored. If you have any opinion that deviates from what the ruling party wants you to have, you basically get gulagged and you live in a perpetual state of fear. And you're also basically told what you're allowed to eat. No, but I'm rich. Well, yeah, does it really matter? If you're on a CBDC and you go to a gas station and you go to try to fill up your Lamborghini, and it says, oh, I'm so sorry, John Smith. You've already bought your gasoline for the allotment week. You can't buy any more. And you say, but I'm rich. I have all this money. I'm sorry, John Smith. You don't actually have all this money. You have a number in a ledger we own and control and monitor and get to decide how much of that you get to spend at any day of the week. And they're already dreaming of this. Klaus Schwab, he jacks off every morning, to this. He watches a video of it. He pays it. He says, oh my God, this gets me so hard. That's his life. Okay. And people are listening to him. So that's the fight. That's our generation's fight. My great-grandfather, he had to deal with the Nazis. My grandfather, he fought in the Korean War, and that was his fight. My dad grew up during the Great Strife in the 60s and 70s, and they had Vietnam, and, they had all the civil unrest and these types of things. My generation, my fight, your fight, is right here, right now. The fact that technology is moving on autopilot towards that, and we have absolutely no oversight, wisdom, or constitutional protections to cover these areas, and we have woefully ineffective governments. So the only way we get our power back is we take our money back, and we take our society back. And then once we have that, we have some leverage to be able to put in protections to ensure that that dystopian world doesn't exist. Or you can go take your bag of silver like Judas did and say, number go up, everything's great. And then one day you're going to wake up just like Jack Ma did in China. And it didn't work out so well for him, even though he was one of the richest men in China and the most powerful men in China.
I'm a tech normie, so I'm more of a consumer of tech, the end product. But one thing that I do is study philosophy, and I got attracted to Cardano after seeing you years ago, with your AMAs and stuff, and you're very philosophical, and that's what really drew me in to Cardano. So what I wanted to ask was, so see, since I study basically philosophy and religions, there's a lot of books that I go to for answers and stuff like that, right? Plato's Republic is my absolute favorite philosophical book. And of course, the Bible and the Dhammapada, the Buddhist writings, those are important also. But my question to you is, what philosophical books or religious books do are your favorite, or do you kind of look to for guidance, or are part of what are part of your ethic, like philosophically or religiously, like what do you look to? What words of philosophers or religions do you look towards for answers and guidance?
That's a great question, and there's a lot of amazing mindsets that are out there. I'm a big fan of Stoicism, so I like Seneca and Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, because really the point of Stoicism is that it's a philosophy that gives you the ability to deal with adversity. The one certainty that all human beings have, no matter who you're born to, where you come from, is that you're going to come up against challenges. And some will be small, some will be big, but every single day when you wake up, there's going to be some form of challenge. And even if you don't have it immediately, you will get it because you get old. And when you get old, your body starts shutting down and you start dying. So you have to have a life philosophy that gives you the ability to deal with the immediate pains and problems, but then also to be able to deal with the inevitability of things you can't change, death. So that's a good house of philosophies because it's battle tested through hundreds of years of some of the most brutal times of humanity, where people would die young. You know, if you half your kids would die before the age of 18. There were slaves. You know, there was wars all the time, unpredictable things. Volcano would blow up, and they say, "Oh, the gods are angry with us." So Stoicism has a lot to say about everything from how to moderate the consequences of greed, pleasure, all the way to how to live well. But it's not a complete philosophy, and it does require some updating and modernizing. You know, there's a lot to say about Buddhist philosophy as well. You know, and there's many different schools of thought. As with anything that's 3,000 years old, you're going to have 40,000 different ways of doing things. But really, the commitment to emptying one's mind and spending time to go in instead of out, and try to get an understanding of that internal dialogue, and then realize that there isn't a singular you, but there is a collection of things about you, is a very powerful concept. And there's been many wisdom traditions throughout the last few thousand years that have tried to create a house of techniques that allow people to navigate these types of things. And what's really interesting is it's quite interactable and compatible with Stoicism when you kind of link those two houses of concepts together. Then I think a lot about Nick Bostrom and the consequences of transhumanism, Naval Harari, as well as another. So Bostrom wrote Life 3.0, and Yuval Harari wrote Homo Deus, and really asking around, well, where is all of this going? Because in contrast to things like Buddhism and Stoicism, which say work with what you got and accept the world as it is, this is the first time in human history where we actually have the ability to manipulate reality around us to the extent where we no longer necessarily have to play with the natural order rules. The challenge is that typically when you're a Stoic or pagan or even a monotheistic religion, you usually write a box around manipulating reality as God. And any time humans gain the ability to take over that domain, there's always a conflict there because we lack the fundamental wisdom to do this consistently well. And the challenge is the more we can manipulate of reality, the more meaningful and consequential the mistakes we make are, to the extent that you actually extinct everybody. So when you look at transhumanism and some of its logical conclusions, there's going to be a synthesis of humanity and machine, such that we will basically be like chimeras, or I think the term that is used by some people is centaurs. So you read Ray Kurzweil, for example, and the whole singularity is near. Gary Kasparov also comes with this idea of centaurs. But basically, the idea is you start augmenting human cognition with artificial intelligence or technology. We already see this with the large language model revolution or the use of smartphones, where we never forget anything anymore because when we forget it, we can just Google it. And now with large language models, we're outsourcing cognition. So we're saying, okay, you know, I don't really know how to summarize something. So I'm just going to go send out, you know, to the AI and say, hey, go summarize this whole thing. And then it'll give me a little summary as if I read it or, you know, I interfaced with it. And that's growing exponentially, that technology. And, you know, Neuralink just got implanted in a human. So when you look horizontally, within the next 10 years to 15 years, both gene therapy and implantable devices are going to get to a point where they go beyond medical to cosmetic and elective, meaning that they're there to augment for enhancement as opposed to correction of a medical deficit. So we don't have a house of philosophies to deal with those types of things. The religious traditions would look at these things as anathema or satanic or problematic at best, and but just downright evil at worst. And the issue with transhumanism is that it's a race to the top. And the problem is once you get there, then all the people who didn't, you kind of push them off the ship. And that's, you know, like you see the movie Gattaca or these types of things, you can talk around a transhumanist society where the augmented basically have rights over the others. So it's also explored by some video games. By the way, video games are great for philosophy. There's a lot of really cool video games these days that elaborate things, whether it be environmentalism or it be transhumanism, like the Deus Ex series, for example. really plays into that whole the consequences of transhumanism and what that means. So it's really cool to see that. So that's coming. So those are kind of the three different schools, though, that I tend to draw most from. Is the transhumanist schools, the trying to understand where that goes and how that works. A lot of Buddhism and Eastern traditions, and then I draw a lot from Stoicism, but by no means did that, and there, Dan Dennett is one of my favorite philosophers, and he always has a lot of really interesting things to say. It's always interesting of free will and consciousness. I think a lot about panpsychism and asking myself, okay, what is the nature of consciousness, and to what extent can we endow consciousness as a collective emergent property of the universe as opposed to something that's ephemeral of our cognition, just something that we got for some reason and it just exists there as a background process and we're not sure what it is. It doesn't really matter, it doesn't really affect anything. So I look to these types of things. There's a lot of analytic philosophers from the 20th century that have deeply inspired me in my personal growth. Like I studied mathematics when I was younger, so I was very interested in Bertrand Russell because he was a mathematician who made the crossover into ethics. And he tried to create a rigorous framework for how to look at life in general, and make prescriptions based upon deduction. So there's always a deontological curious notion there. It's almost like Immanuel Kant, where you can calculate things in a certain way and get a sense of the world around you and be able to talk about it. But then again, there's also fundamental questions which are difficult. Like Peter Sanger, for example, wrote a lovely essay years ago. We talked about the nature of human beings and if they're intrinsically evil if left to their own devices. And unfortunately, when you really read and apply logic to these things, it's starting to become self-evident that there are demons in our nature that are hard to tackle. So everything that's old is new again. These new philosophers in the 20th century are kind of rediscovering debates that occurred to the Greeks and the Romans. And the Greeks and the Romans were much more practical, and they said, look, there's only three things in life you need to control: your tongue, your stomach, and your cock. And if you can control those three things, 99% of your problems in life will be resolved in one way or the other. And there's only two pains that you'll ever feel: the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. If you lack discipline, you have no regrets. You have nothing but regrets, excuse me. And if you have discipline, you don't have any regrets because you can tame those three demons. And those are the ones that are going to create most of your problems in your life, outside of unexpected things that hit you, that 1%. So, that's kind of a brief summary of it. But one of these days, I'll write a book and try to put all the different philosophies together. And I've also been looking a lot into AI and using prompt engineering to try to get AI to do an exhaustive analysis of many of the metaphysical traditions and ancient religions, combined with where we're at today, as well as a lot of the major philosophical essays, which in many cases, by the way, are unnecessarily wordy, unnecessarily complex. If you read Wittgenstein or you read any of the postmodernist stuff, they just go out of their way to make what they've written as inaccessible as possible. And that's because they don't want to admit that it's almost like a self-help author like Diego Forte. He writes Building a Second Brain. The totality of his system can be expressed in about 15 to 30 pages, yet he writes a 300-page book. Why? Because he wants to sell you a 300-page book and have you pay 300-page book. You're not going to pay $30 for a big book. Well, analogously, if you're a postmodernist philosopher like Foucault or Sartre, you're just not going to succeed academically if you read a 3-page paper saying everything is subjective. You have to litter it with a huge amount of veracity, and then suddenly you have hundreds of papers and all these books. But at the end of the day, it's life is shit, and we're all going to die, and everything's subjective. So it'd be nice to actually use AI to summarize and simplify and find unification and connect ideas and link them together in ways they haven't quite been. And I think what will end up happening is there'll be a rediscovery of what ancients knew, but from the lens of the fact that now we have new capabilities that really were reserved for the gods. And what does humanity do? And how do we achieve wisdom under those circumstances? That's my off-the-cuff thoughts of these things.
Hey, I wanted to get your thoughts on our current state of our geopolitical goings-ons in the world with the war and all that stuff, and maybe also your thoughts on
our incompetent leaders who don't seem to have any fidelity to our laws, our constitution, or our way of life. Love to hear your thoughts about that.
Well, I'm meeting with General Mattis on the 25th, and so I'll have a good dinner with him, and we'll kind of talk through how he sees the Middle East. And he's one of the brightest generals outside of Petraeus that we've had. So I'll kind of pip him a little bit for roughly what's happening. But in general, the problem is that we have no clear U.S. policy. So basically, everything is just buckshot and fragmented, and it really shows that no one's really in charge at the top. So the Ukraine policy doesn't make any sense. The Israel policy doesn't make a lot of sense. The Iran policy doesn't make a lot of sense. And we're spending a lot of money and a lot of people are dying. And China's taking advantage of it. Russia's taking advantage of it. Like before Biden took office, Russia and the United States were starting to build a close-knit relationship. And the idea was to pull a reverse Nixon, where the US would turn Russia on China because the Russians have a lot more to gain by being our friends than our enemies. The reality is the Russians share a huge border with China, and China's taking all the old Soviet republics over, like Mongolia and Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan and Armenia and Georgia. It's Chinese money that's leaking in. And what that means is that if the Russians leave that default state of affairs, they're going to be hollowed from the inside out. The Chinese will come in and take all their natural resources, buy all their companies, and Putin will eventually get either overthrown or die. And then a pro-China leader will come in. And Russia becomes basically a proxy state of China. So the Russians know that. And what was happening was that the Russians were starting to build a good relationship again with Europe. They were trading an enormous amount of fossil fuels and other things to the Europeans, especially Germany. And Trump was starting to build relationships there. And also, we had a pretty good Middle East policy with the Abraham Accords, where the first time in my life, Israel was welcomed in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. I was at the World Governance Forum and saw the King, Sheikh Mohammed, and he walked by an Israeli flag in Dubai. 10 years ago, you'd be arrested for having an Israeli passport. You just couldn't enter the country. And now you have the king of the country, like walking by a flag in his country, allowing himself to have a picture taken. So Israel was being brought into the broader Middle East, and what was happening was a South versus North thing was occurring, where Saudi Arabia and Emirates and Israel were starting to align themselves to fight Iran, the proxy state of Iraq, and Turkey in Syria. Now we have a situation where the Abraham Accords are not necessarily falling apart, but they've been kind of shelved. We now have the Hamas issue, and it looks like the military-industrial complex got its wish, and we're starting to see a conflict between Israel and Iran. Iran was starved for money under the Trump administration. It had $8 billion left, and it was almost bankrupt. First thing Biden did is give them $100 billion and reinvigorated them and rearmed them. And then they strengthened their alliance with Russia and China. And now they're rearming, and they're quite a bit more formidable than they used to be. So Iran is now capable of doing a lot more, and they're now allied even stronger with Turkey and Syria. And so they are definitely a geopolitical threat. So this is one of the most disastrous foreign policies I've ever seen. And frankly, I saw it firsthand. I went to El Salvador right after they accepted Bitcoin as their sovereign currency. And I had dinner with Bukele, the president. And, the Trump administration, Ron Johnson was the ambassador. He's an old Cold War warrior guy, CIA guy. And he was good friends with the president. They'd watch movies and hang out at the presidential palace till 1 o'clock in the night. And, El Salvador was a very strong ally of the United States. Biden got elected, and ambassador changed, the policy changed. It went from we're friends to regime change. We want to get rid of Bukele. So he just kind of dumped the U.S. and moved over and built a strong relationship with China. And now that they have a foothold, it's spilling over into Honduras and Guatemala. I mean, it's just facts. These things have happened. We have proxy wars everywhere. There's no clear mission. Like, what's the mission in Ukraine? Is it reestablishing the borders pre-war 2022? Is it pre-war 2014, pre-war 2007 to 1992? Is it regime change with Putin? Did anybody explain that to you? It's just kill the Russians, yay. We're going to outfight the Russians in a war of attrition, the guys who fought in Stalingrad and Finland. Yeah, okay, good luck with that. It's like, it doesn't really seem like we have a path to win that one. And and nobody tells us, the American people, what the value is. We do know what the cost is. $120 billion translates to twice as much as what the federal government spends on K through 12 education in the United States. So for every dollar we give to your kids that go to school, at every high school and middle school and elementary school in America, we give $2 to a Ukrainian government that launders a lot of that money. Just a fact. And they want to give another $100 billion to them. So I guess they can just continue a stalemate conflict with no end in sight, because somehow the Russians are going to collapse, even though their economy is actually stronger today than it was when the war began. By the way, 18% of their GDP was controlled by China before the war began. Now 50% is controlled by China. So what we did is the Russians went from maybe they'll start possing with us to a proxy state of China. And the Chinese and Russians are now together on BRICS. Colombia just asked to join. Over 50 countries are there. And what the Chinese are going to do is gradually de-dollarize the entire world. And in the process of doing that, we will pay real interest rates then on our national debt, which is $34 trillion. Before the end of this decade, it'll be 50 trillion. And at a 7.5% rate, that translates to about 50% of the entire federal budget will be spent on just servicing the debt that we have. So this is what's happened in just such a short period of time. So when you see some people that are on the left say, oh, well, Biden's just all of that's his only problem. No, it's the most disastrous foreign policy that we've had in probably 50 years. And it's caused catastrophic harm to every institution in America. And then, of course, the domestic policy, are people more united or are they divided? They're divided. And then on the fiscal policy, is the SEC and all of these regulators being fair and prudent? No, they're at war with our industry and they're creating anti-clarity. I just got a letter from Switzerland to give us an award in October for founding Ethereum there. They gave some statistics in the letter. They said that when we founded Ethereum there, we were the first business. Since then, 1,290 firms were founded, and the total value of all those companies founded in Switzerland were $384 billion. All of them would have been likely founded in the United States had we had sensible fiscal policy and regulatory policy. Instead, they went to Switzerland. So that's the real life consequence. 1/3 of $1 trillion and 1,290 businesses just on the Swiss side, not even counting Singapore, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, their places. And it translates to less jobs for us. It translates to a more dangerous country, a more divided country, and ultimately, America collapsing if this continues. So that's where we stand, geopolitically right now. I can't say necessarily that Trump is going to do a better job. I have incredibly serious concerns about his age, his competency, and his objectivity at this point because he's so angry and he has nothing to lose burning everything to the ground. And that's not a solution to anything. So I was kind of hoping he'd sit this one out. We'd get a new group of people like a Vivek Ramaswamy or something to come in who has fresh ideas, who actually was born in, a reasonable time period. Like he was born in 85 instead of like in the 50s. Unfortunately, he is the nominee, which is why I endorsed RFK, because I can't vote for him again after what he did with Fauci and COVID and what happened during his administration. For all the good things, were many, many very bad things. And he fired some great people who basically just couldn't work for him because he was so volatile. And it's never his fault and everybody else is wrong. It's not leadership. So we need to turn the page as a country and we need to reset and we need to change the way that we do things. And you're not going to solve the problem by literally electing one of the two past presidents for re-election who are responsible for all the problems we have today. It's just madness.
Back in the late 1990s, I worked at Webvan at homegrocer.com in the early, before the .com bubble burst. And I was just going over, I was looking at a documentary that was kind of going over the whole situation. And one of the things that's striking is there's a striking resemblance of what happened with the .com bubble bust, or whatever they call it, to kind of where we are in crypto now, or maybe, I don't know if we've maybe passed that yet, with like some of these scams that happened back in the past couple years and stuff. But one of the amazing things that was really telling is some of these companies got huge evaluations. Now, some of them had great ideas, like like Webvan and homegrocer.com, they were delivering groceries to the house, except not everybody had high-speed internet. Not everybody was connected yet. So it was kind of too early for those ideas. And as I look at crypto and where we are now, and when I decided to get into it, I took that as an example because, I'm gonna put some money into it or whatever. I'm looking long term. And it's almost, there's a lot of similarities between what happened then and kind of what has happened in crypto for a while there. I was just wanting to see if you can talk a little bit about that. I know you were young at the time, but from what you know about these evaluations and the stock market and whatever the hell they were doing with these markets, can you kind of talk a little bit about what you think uh, over kind of like that, like where we're going in the next 20 years?
Okay, so if you add up the valuations of all of the internet companies as of January of 1999, and you compare those valuations, which were insane and overpriced, to the valuations of all the internet companies, internet native companies as of 2024, you're comparing billions to trillions. So even though everything was horribly overvalued and the internet was really hype, and it didn't have the underlying technology to live up to that hype. The majority of Americans were on 56K modems. We didn't have any standards. E-commerce sucked. The laws weren't where they needed to be. Browsers were not where they needed to be. I mean, it was really far, far away. If you were probably doing like CGI scripts and things like that when you were programming back in the day.
Actually, I wasn't in the programming. I was I was blue collar in the warehouses and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, so a common gateway interface. I mean, we didn't even have Ajax. I mean, there was so many things that were missing from that experience. And then now in 2024, could you imagine a world without Amazon or Microsoft or Google or Facebook or Twitter or any of these things? We just take them as standard utilities. YouTube is a standard utility, and the vast majority of our day is spent on a cell phone online where we're connected 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we have 5G and we have fiber optic and all these other things. And so that's the thing about crypto is that if you look at the Gartner hype curve, it gets too hyped too quickly. Valuations get too high relative to what they can do. There's a winter, and then over time, builders build the real utilities, and then you wake up and it's as if you never didn't have it. It's always been there. And they're worth trillions. In this case, it'll be tens of trillions of dollars. Because at the end of the day, what crypto is doing is it's creating a mechanism for people around the world who don't trust each other to have a way to trust each other. I don't care who gave Paul Krugman the Nobel Prize in economics. I would fail him if I was teaching him basic economics 101 every day if he tells me that that's not a valuable thing. People don't trust each other. And the whole point of institutions and transnational bodies and courts and other things is to remove distrust, thereby enabling commerce to occur. And blockchain technology at its core is a trust engine. It creates rules of the game that you can't violate, even if you're a nation state. And as long as you stay within that game, every single person who plays it is treated fairly. There is no other social system, political system, or economic system where that's the case. Everything always has that asterisk or that exception to the rule or the Hunter Biden situation or name your thing where there's some special person and deep down inside they play by a second set of rules and that are different and distinct from yours. In crypto, everybody's treated equally. No one can violate it. The value to society in an always-on global world where information moves instantaneously and every country has to find a way to get along is incalculable. It's in the hundreds of trillions of dollars at the end of the rainbow. And if people understand that, either they benefit from the dishonesty or they're not really thinking about how the world really works. Furthermore, they're not paying attention to the geopolitics where we've gone from a monopolar world in 1990s to a multipolar world where we have not just two, but now three standards. There's this Russia standard, and then you have this China standard, and then you have this American standard. And very quickly, that's going to fragment even more. And these people are no longer listening to each other or playing with each other. You got Biden running around saying, oh, well, we just joined the Paris Treaty and we're doing all this stuff for global warming. Meanwhile, all the treaties and diplomatic relations with China and Russia that are relevant to environmentalism are gone.
because the countries won't talk to each other anymore. So nation states can't negotiate anymore. And the rules-based international order that we inherited is gone. And in replacing that are private systems. And we're going to have to just do our best with private systems and engineer new economic systems accordingly that don't require countries to do these types of things. And that's what crypto is bringing to the table. And if people think this is just a new payment system or a slightly better way of getting your internet connection or whatever the hell it is, I mean, honestly, guys, they're just missing the entire point. It's just about trust. And as a thought experiment, just to show you how powerful trust is in a relationship. Let's say that you own a ranch and you want to buy some land from your next door neighbor. Let's say you trust your next door neighbor. You have a good relationship. You went to college together or high school together and you've known them for 30 years, whatever. Okay, you go out there and say, hey, Bill, I want to buy some land. Is that 100-acre lot right there? And he said, oh, yeah, okay, how much? You shake on it and you say, well, we'll write up the contract in a little bit. And you write it up, and then you find out that there's some issues. You go back to him and say, hey, Bill, can we change the deal a little bit? There's some issues. Oh, yeah, no problem at all. And you sign again, and the whole transaction's done in 2 weeks. Okay. Now say you don't trust Bill, you hate Bill. He's just an asshole and he's very, very bad relationships. So you go to buy his land. You have a lawyer. He has a lawyer. You enter tough negotiations for 3 months. You discover this problem. Instantly, you're in litigation. You spend 3 to 6 months in litigation. Eventually, you close. Now, let's say you spent 9 months and $500,000. What's the end result of that? You got the same piece of land. Okay? 2 weeks versus 9 months. Handshake, you had some dinner and some beers. Everybody's happy. Same price. But the difference is now 9 months, $500,000 in legal fees, more bad blood, and then you're still probably going to have tail of litigation, and you have that land, and you're just real pissed off about it. The only difference between those two situations is trust at the core of it. And how many things in life work that way when you really think about it? That if you have trust, your transactions are really efficient, your contracts are really small. It blew my mind when I started doing business in Japan, where the contracts would be like 1 or 2 pages long. And I was like, this is crazy. US contracts are dozens of pages long. Why are these Japanese contracts so light? And they say, well, because there's this reputation thing. And the contract's more of a formality. Nobody really wants to break a contract or go into litigation because then they get a bad reputation from it. So usually if there's an issue, they just go and talk it out and resolve it through different means. That's how they do it there. In America, the minute we have a problem, we sue each other. Oh, my lawyer will talk to your lawyer. And then you have to go through this brutal dispute resolution process, and you're always trying to find a way to screw each other. See, that's the difference. And that's the power of high efficiency, high trust systems that people believe in and have integrity. At the end of the rainbow, those systems produce so much more economic value and they remove the friction. So that's crypto in a nutshell. That's what we do. That's what we're about. And that's what we fight for. And it's going to take decades for the old systems to work their way through, just like it took decades for everybody to get online and get websites and these types of things. But once they did, they don't go back. Nobody says, I want to go back to a paper-based system, or I want to go back to the old legacy system where we have double standards and things are unfair. Nobody wants to do that.
All right, there you go, folks. That's great. That's really great conversations. He's not just a smart guy, like technically and stuff, but he's very wise, as you can see. The way he speaks about issues and stuff. There's a lot of wisdom there, and it was just a great. It really is an honor to be able to have those conversations with him, and there'll definitely be more. I don't know if I'll upload them. Maybe at some point. I have mentioned it to him in several of our chats. He's a very busy guy. Of course, he's running all kinds of companies and stuff. But I mentioned to him that it'd be great if we can have a chat, an hour and a half, philosophy, be great. But in the meantime, there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. I really did. I really do enjoy listening to Charles. If you do, please look him up on YouTube. He has his channel and his videos, and he's a very intellectual, not just intellectual, but wise, very wise guy. So if you want to learn more about them, please go. And the project again is called Cardano. That's the blockchain. You can learn more about that just by looking up, on YouTube videos and stuff like that. You can learn more about Cardano. Um, what else? That's it. So, all right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, please don't forget to tell your friends, share, hit the like button, the subscribe button, wherever you're listening to us. This is probably only going to be on audio. So, you guys on Spotify, hit the like button, thumbs up, whatever it is. Get this out there. I love spending time with you guys, and I apologize that it's been a minute. I'm trying to think of what to, talk about. I have some ideas because the politics are going crazy right now, but we don't want to just come out here and talk about the same old thing. But we are working on an idea, so soon, very soon, we'll be on here again with the next installment. So in the meantime, I want you guys to take care of yourself, stay safe, stay healthy, please. You want to learn more about the crypto industry, do some research and check it out, man. This is kind of the future. Once you learn more about it, you will see that this is pretty much an evolution of the internet. Where we are with internet, crypto, and where it's taking the internet is like an evolution of the internet. So you might want to learn a little bit more about that because that's the future. All right, guys, stay safe, stay healthy. That's it. I'll see you guys soon. Peace out, folks.
This is Thesis.